So we're going to be in Proverbs 21. We'll see how far we get today. I got to about 9 verses this morning, but we're going to talk about motives and the heart. We're going to talk about justice and sacrifice versus obedience, some of those type of things, and we're going to talk about God's sovereignty. So there'll be a lot to talk about here this morning. And then if we get there, we'll even talk about marriage and relationships, because we'll get to that fun verse about how it's better to live on the corner of a roof than it is in the house with a contentious wife. So we'll get to that verse too, which will be, we had quite a discussion this morning on that, so we'll see where we all land. But would somebody like to read verse 1 and get started?
The king's heart is in the hand of the Lord, like the rivers of water, he turns it wherever he wishes.
Okay, so to understand this better, you have to understand that kings in the day this was written had tremendous power, right? Remember, kings back then demanded worship. A lot of them called themselves gods with a little g, right? So they had absolute power. And what do we know? What's the saying about absolute power? Anybody know?
Corrupts absolutely.
Yes, it definitely can, right? So when he says this, understand that he's talking about a king that has absolute power. Right now, we have, most of our governments have some kind of a council or a Congress or something to kind of balance that power, but back then they didn't. And yet, even in that instance, he says that God will channel their hearts like a river. So the picture here is like a farmer. Think of a farmer who does irrigation or runs the ditches, to channel the water to the crops. That's what he's saying that the God can do. But what's the limiting factor here? Because remember, this is Proverbs. This is not, it's Solomon saying, so it's 80% true, but there's always exceptions, there's always rules. So what's the limiting factor on God channeling the hearts of kings? Okay, play what's that game? Let's say it's 2 syllables. Charades, 2 syllables. Begins with an F. It's free. Free will. There we go, right? So God, morning Hayden. Morning Salvatore.
Good morning.
Morning, sir. Good to see you, man.
Likewise, thank you.
So free will. So God has all power, but he chooses not to override free will. Why? Sunday school
It's
question.
gotta be our choice.
Kind of. Why? What's important about free will? What's not possible if you don't have free will?
Choices.
Yeah? A little bit deeper. Begins with an L.
True love.
Love. God is love, right? So he wants love, and if we have love, in order to have love, we have to have free will. So even though he channels the hearts of kings, he wants the kings to love them, so he gives them free will. So a lot of these kings, and we still have some today, they pick free will over loving God, right? And then they go evil or corrupt, absolutely, right? Does that make sense? Okay. So the application question is, where are you choosing free will in your life? Where have you said, God, I could really drive better than you? Like, God, I'll let you drive all these areas, but you kind of need to be in the back seat in this area, because this one's mine. All right? Do we have compartmental lives, or Like, God, I'll give you everything, but this little area, I'm not ready to give that to you. There's a famous quote when they were hiring mercenaries during the Holy Wars. The churches would hire these mercenaries. And for them to fight, they would have to be baptized before they went into battle. But the mercenaries would go under the water and they'd hold their sword above the water. So what they were saying is, you got me, but Lord, I'm in control of the sword. Right? So when you go under the water with Christ, what did you hold up? You know, in American culture, a lot of it is holding this up, right? What did you hold up? What's out of the water? Is it your spouse? Is it your relationship, your kids? It can be a good thing. It doesn't always have to be bad. That makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
Thoughts, questions? Okay. Let's go to verse 2. Who'd like to read?
Every way of a man is right in his own eyes, but the Lord weighs on the hearts.
Okay. So what this says is motivation in the heart is the most important thing. So how do we see that play out today?
I mean, I feel like a lot of times you think that you're doing right on the surface, but are you really doing it right in here? You know, God looks at the heart, the right thing, the true right thing to do, and that's how I get that. It's like, you can, just because it looks right doesn't mean that it always is right. You know, it's a distortion of the truth sometimes. So God weighs what's really in here versus what you're doing outwardly.
Yeah, I think there's probably another verse on this very topic, but you know, a lot of times we may do the right thing, but we may do it for the wrong motivation.
True.
Right? So you can do the right thing, but if you're doing it from the wrong heart posture, then God can't bless you for that. Now, sometimes it's hard for us to see that, and other people may be like, you know, you may do a whole bunch of charitable work, you know, and you get your name on a building, or you get a monument, or you get your name on the hospital, or all this. Well, that may be your reward, right? Like, you may have chosen that reward. Now, God may use that for good, what you did, but you may have done that for the wrong reason.
Right.
To get accolades of men instead of to get accolades from God. Right?
I like what the scripture that you put in here from Jeremiah. The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? So only God really knows that. So I like the scripture there.
So since the original state of our heart is wicked, how do we change that?
Go to church.
What?
Go to church.
That's part of it, but
We
church
can't change
sometimes is the problem, right? Back to this one. A lot of people are going to church and they heart's not in the right place. They're going to church because there's cute girls there. Like, that's what brought me to church, honestly, the first time. I heard when I was in junior high that the Methodists allowed dancing, and I knew there were cute girls that were Methodists, so I immediately said, I'm a Methodist, right? So, you know, what motivates you to go to church? Why are you going to church because your parents told you to go? You know? Why are you going to church?
You gotta ask God for a new heart.
Yeah.
You have to desire it.
Seek after it like wisdom, right? Okay, let's go to verse 3. We're flying now.
To do righteousness and justice is more acceptable to the Lord than sacrifice.
Okay, so we kind of talked about this this morning a little bit. So there are people that do evil things, but yet they give to charity and they have foundations, right? So it's kind of like they're trying to keep score, like math, right? Like, and if we're honest with ourselves, sometimes we're kind of that way. Like, okay, God, I did this bad thing, but I'm going to give more to church, or I'm going to go to church this week, right? And it doesn't work that way, right? Jesus is the payment for the sin, and the heart needs to be in the right place. And the sacrifice is not a substitute for the obedience. You can't earn your way into heaven, right? And it's all about the heart, like we've been talking about before. You know, we have lots of examples for this. Even the patriarchs, right? Even Jacob. You remember when he was on the run after he stole his, the birthright from his brother, and on the run from his brother, and then he's sleeping out and he negotiates with God. God, if you protect me on this, I'm going to give you 10%, and he's a patriarch, right? So it's in our human nature to kind of negotiate and think, oh, I'm gonna do my part. I'm gonna offset this. And if that's our motivation, it's gonna be hard for God to bless it. And what do we see in Jacob's life after that, right? He had to go through that sowing and reaping. He wanted Rachel, but then he got tricked and he ended up with Laban, right? And then he had to serve another 7 years to get his bride. 14 years before he actually got Rachel, because he got tricked. It went around, right? Okay. The question for us, of course, is look at your life. Where are you doing something that is religious based, not relationship based? Because I assure you, when you get to heaven, God's not going to pull up your church attendance. He isn't. Because there's a lot of people that are going to church and they're doing this and they're doing that, and he's going to say, like the scriptures say, I never knew you. Right?
Deep.
So think about it. Are you performing like a Christian, or do you have a relationship?
I remember wrestling with this with fruits, right? You look for fruits in someone. But we've also discussed the fig tree.
Mm-hmm.
If it's not, he walked by the fig tree that wasn't producing when it was supposed to be, and he's cut it down. It may look like it's supposed to be producing. I forget the actual sentence he uses, but
yeah, I think that was Matthew 23. And the interesting thing on that verse was figs were not in season. But when you dig deeper, that particular time was the budding. So when he walked by, and you can actually eat the buds, and the buds are like good for you. They're like vitamins. They're not the best tasting things, but they're really good for you. And the buds weren't on the tree, meaning that if it wasn't going to bud, it wasn't going to produce fruit. So
it was dead on the inside.
yes, absolutely. But on the outside, it had the pretty green leaves, right? It's just like us. Excellent point. Okay, I think we're at verse 4. Who'd like to read?
A haughty look, a proud heart, and the plowing of the wicked are sin.
Okay, what's a haughty look?
Kind of like I'm better than you. Kind of,
Mm-hmm.
chin up. Like
Snooty.
yeah.
Slouch.
Trump would be like, that's a haughty look.
And what is meant by plowing of the wicked or sin? What do you do when you plow?
It's like planning, like you're trying.
Planning.
Yeah, you're Like we,
So what are the wicked plowing? Where are they trying to plant?
More wickedness.
Just more wickedness.
And more sin, right? So even their intentions are that way. It's just like if you have a relationship with Christ, you're called to be salt and light, and the darkness is going to flee. But if they're motivated by pride, then who are they serving and what are they plowing?
Themselves.
Right. And they're listening to the enemy and they're doing his work. Because remember, we talked about this before. The enemy can't create. He's dependent on us because we're made in the image of God and we create. So he can whisper in our ears, and then if we make an agreement, we start working, then we're plowing for the wrong crop. And then the sowing and reaping happens. Which is never fun. Okay. So, this pride is a whole thing. So, normally the ones closest to us can see the pride. And I will tell you from my own experience, marriage is great for that. My wife has had a hard job. I've been in training for many decades now. And she's got a lot of the pride out, but it's a nonstop job for her. Right? And our loved ones, the ones that truly love us, can see where we see pride in us that we can't see. We have blind spots. We had a discussion about this morning. So one of them said, so I'll pose this to y'all and see what y'all think. But one of the guys this morning said, what's the difference between pride and confidence?
Where it rests.
Okay, explain.
Is it in yourself or is it in what he's given you?
Okay. Any other thoughts?
I think it's more of like, is it true or is it something you want to be true? You know, like if you're confident, then you don't have to. I mean, you can trust in that because it's true. Like you're confident in your ability, or you know that it's true. You can stand on that. But if it's not, and you want it to be, and you're like acting like you're, oh, I got it, when you really don't. But somebody that's confident, they're not worried about it. I got it. You know.
I think sometimes too though, like confident people have the ability to like still be humble and like be able to admit that they're wrong sometimes. But like people that have pride, a lot of times they will not at all admit that they're wrong.
Oh yeah, they'll argue about it forever.
Yeah,
know.
so I think that to me is the big difference I think of when I think of pride and confidence.
I think that's excellent. What does the Bible say about Jesus in this area? What's the adjective that they describe?
Humble.
Probably humble.
There was also another word, meek.
Mhm.
That's the one I was looking for. So what's the definition of meek?
Servitude.
Biblically or Webster?
Close. It's power under control, right? And we're supposed to be conformed to his image, right? So he had the power. Think about it. At the snap of his finger, he could have called 10,000 legions of angels. Even, what was it? James and John, the sons of thunder. Remember that story, right?
Yeah.
Like, God, why don't you rain down fire on them because they rejected us, And he could have. I mean, in some ways, they were asking in faith because they knew he had the power to do it. Yet he restrained himself, right? And that's how we're supposed to act. We know we have the power. We have the risen Christ, the one that's alive, the one that defeated Satan and the grave operating inside of us. We have all the promises of his full power and authority and everything else, but we shouldn't be using that cavalier, right? We should have the confidence, but also have that power under control. Makes sense? Okay, let's go to verse 5.
The plans of the diligent lead surely to plenty, but those of everyone who is hasty surely to poverty.
Okay, so, bless you. In baseball, the ones that normally are the top performers are the ones that get a lot of base hits, right? They go up to bat and they have a high on base percentage. And that's what you should be looking for in life, and this is kind of what I'm translating. This is the East Texas Cody redneck translation of it, but that, you know, don't swing for the fences. You want to be consistent. You want to be known for that person that is rational, consistent, and takes the base hits. Okay? Base hits, or you're going to be on base a lot more often than striking out, right? You start swinging for the fences and things don't normally go well. Yes, it may work once or twice, but even if it works, sometimes that's more of a curse than a blessing, right? Because you step up there, you swing for the fences, and bam, home run, and then you get overconfident and you think you're going to be able to do that every time, right? So the idea here is to work diligently. And what's the other side of that? What's the consequence, and where does it tell you here? What are the words? Hasty. How do y'all translate that?
Without preparation or thought.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So how many of us make a decision out of fear? Right? Or you making a decision when you're emotional?
Or out of impulse, just because you're trying to like get something
Get it
done
done.
quick. Like
Yeah.
you don't have time to think on it, and you're just like, I just need them to be quiet, or I need to move on to the next thing. Like, let me just make a decision.
And what
Impulse
is,
big.
you know, when you're in fear, your brain operates
Mhm.
differently. You've got that fight or flight kind of mindset. That's not the time to make an important decision.
Mm-hmm.
So when you start to feel that, we know the Bible tells us, depending on your translation, about 365 times not to fear.
Mm-hmm.
So when you start feeling that, the first thing you should do is A, try to rebuke it, but B, don't make a decision when you're in that state. You got to say no. You know, people will pressure you. Well, you know,
Mm-hmm.
this deal goes away if you don't make it right now. You know, well, that should be a warning sign for you
Red
right
flag.
there, right? You know, or so you need to pray. Things that are done hastily, things that are done in pressure, things that are done in fear are usually not right. Okay? Thoughts? Anybody made a quick decision under
just-
pressure
I'm
bit
thinking
them
about
in the
marketplace right now. I'm thinking about when they say take it or leave it right now and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Buying a
there's
car.
been many situations.
Yeah.
It's like when you start a business.
The car too thing, you know.
If you see someone else do something in business and you think you can do the same thing without planning or getting educated or even putting your hands on it, you're gonna fall flat on your face within a short time versus if you work under somebody and learn from them and take your time. I mean, it takes time to learn.
Do you know the number one cause of small business failure?
Not planning for going in debt at first. I would say you have to go down.
You're getting the symptoms, but
Not lack of knowledge.
Preparation.
no, it's surprising. It's growth. So what happens is the small business is kind of like the home run we were just talking about. The small business starts to see a spike in demand and growth, and then they go out and get a bunch of debt, or they hire a bunch of people, and
they
then
don't
all of a
have
sudden the
time to-
demand falls off, and then they're
Can't
in
sustain.
trouble and they can't sustain it, right?
Mhm.
And that's the number one cause of small business failure. It's
Wow.
not, you know, that they make a product that people don't want or other stuff. It's having to have the wisdom to actually run the marathon and not sprint.
To get in a bind or a debt or in a situation
Yeah,
where you can
to say
be able
no
to
to
climb
debt.
out of and keep the business running.
And that happens in all kinds of it. Even farmers, right? Think of farmers. I mean, John Deere goes out and says, you know, you'd be a lot more comfortable in an air-conditioned tractor. You know, you really need to upgrade that tractor. And then they take on a ton of debt, and now all of a sudden they can't cash flow, right? So sometimes we need to,
Prepare for seasons of famine.
yeah, we need to put a hat on and fight through the heat, right? Because that heat refines us. Okay, 6.
Getting treasures by a lying tongue is the fleeting fantasy of those who seek death.
Okay, colorful language there, right? But, you know, if you're doing it out of a lying tongue, if you're not being honest in your dealings, then it's going to catch up with you. I mean, even when we think it doesn't, like, I'm right there with you. Like, I want justice for a lot of the evil that's going on right now, especially the Epstein files. You know, it's just mind-boggling, you know? Just, I mean, culturally, as bad as some of the things have happened with, you know, some of the riots we had and with George Floyd and all that, you know, and people just getting totally upset, and regardless of where you are on that subject, the reaction was incredible. You know, it was some of the most destruction we've had from riots in American history, even past the Civil War, and yet we have thousands of children with horrific abuse and dying and cannibalism, things by our elite, and the streets are quiet, right? So it's almost a conviction on us to a certain point, right? But regardless, justice will be done. And those people that engaged in that, they better hope the justice is here. Because if the justice is here, it's kind of like what Paul said, right? They're not of us, so I'm going to give them to the devil for the destruction of their flesh so that their soul may be saved, right? And I think some of these people are going to get that opportunity. I would like it to happen today. Personally, I'd be happy to, you know, start making millstones myself. But nonetheless, I think some of them are going to get the opportunity. You know, there's a lot of talk like Prince Andrew. You know, is he going to roll over? Is he going to talk? Right? And maybe the repentance and him actually rolling over, he's not going to escape justice ultimately, but it may make it lighter and it may save his soul. Right? So, regardless, if we're trying to do those things, back to the application to our own lives, if you're trying to do those things and you're being deceitful, it's not going to end in a reward. It may pay for a while, but like the other verses we've said, it'll be sweet in your mouth and then it'll turn to gravel. Right?
I mean, it's talking about getting treasures by a lying tongue. I think it's talking about doing business without being honest about it. I think that's what this verse is talking about. I don't know where you're going with what you were with the political side of it. I don't understand how that relates to this.
Well,
It's talking about treasures.
child trafficking is an incredibly profitable business.
Right. I don't think they were lying to people about what they were doing.
Yeah. They were doing it in the shadows.
The seller and the buyer knew what they were going through. I think it's more talking about, like, if I come into your house and I say I'm gonna fix your foundation that you can't see underneath there, and I'm gonna do all these things with all this amount of material, and then I go underneath there, I'm gonna use one board.
Yeah.
and bang on the wall with a hammer and make it sound like I'm working, and then come collect the check.
Well, I think both apply. I would say, I don't disagree with you, but if there were victims, you know, that were saying, you know, that were lured into it, you know, by a lie, and, you know, saying they're gonna be in a pageant, or saying is they're gonna
Snake
introduce you
oil.
for a modeling contract, and, you know.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, even one of the owners is the owners of the school photography, when you pay for your kids' pictures, you know, I mean, that's kind of dark, right?
Super dark.
It reminds me of just snake oil, you know, on Facebook and everything.
Oh, yeah.
You get, oh, if you just do this, you'll lose 30 pounds, or if you just do this, you'll have income for, you know, forever. No, it's,
Mm-hmm.
nothing is won by a hasty decision, but
The charlatans, yeah, a lot of charlatans. Okay, let's go on to verse 7. They're kind of related, so.
the violence of the wicked will destroy them because they refuse to do justice.
Yeah, and that's kind of, I guess, kind of where we were talking about before. Probably maybe Salvatore, that's what I was thinking more
Yeah,
of the
that
Epstein,
really
was
came
the second
up.
one. You know, because the violence, right? You're going to, there's deceit and then there's violence. And they're both gonna lead to destruction. One is death and the other one is destroy. So it's probably, there's some degrees there. We could get into that topic, but probably don't have time. So let's go on to verse 8.
The way of the guilty man is perverse, but as for the pure, his work is right.
So I'll read you from McGee, our used to be country Texas preacher that moved to LA. The way of a guilty man is very crooked, but as for the pure, his work is right. Your life will demonstrate what kind of person you really are. If you're right with God, that'll be revealed in your life.
Jimmy McGee.
Yeah, Vernon
Yeehaw,
McGee.
yeah, ain't nobody yeehaw.
Vernon J. So, I think that gets back to what we were talking about before. You know, is it just leaves on the tree, or is there fruit? You know, we've talked about this before, the disagreement of the mouth and the hands, the actions. Are your mouth saying one thing and your hands and your actions saying another? You know, and we gotta be watchful of that. Is your work pure and honest?
I'm not reading the next one. I'm not reading the next one.
Yeah, the next one is where we're definitely gonna have a little bit of conversation, so. Let's read verse 9. Who would like to read?
Better to dwell in a corner of a housetop than in a house shared with a contentious woman.
Okay. So, first off, let me try to explain housetops for those that don't understand. In biblical days, there was no air conditioning. Okay? So housetops are not like we think of. Okay? Housetops had, even back to Deuteronomy and the laws, they had roofs where you'd put a regulation that they put a railing on the housetop. Because people hung out on the housetop. When it was really hot, they would even sleep on the housetop. Okay?
Breeze.
So it was a place of social, it was a place, but it's like, it's so contentious, you're gonna spend all your time on the housetop, even when it's cold outside, right? I think that's the interpretation here. Now, before we start discussing this, let me read McGee's thing here, because I think it's, I'll spare you the southern accent this time, but understand McGee was very against alcohol. He was definitely a teetotaler, so I think this is quite a telling verse here. Down in Nashville, the retired pastor of a church and I would repeatedly go down to jail to get a man out who was a member of the church. He'd be arrested over and over again for drunkenness. One time, the retired preacher said something to me that I shall never forget. If I were married to the woman he's married to, I would drink also. Of course, it's just as bad for the woman to be married to the wrong husband. The wife and I mentioned just the other night that we felt sorry for a certain woman because she's married to a man like that. And then we can go on in the Bible. There's examples of this, right? On both sides, right? So we have Abigail, who was originally married to Nabal. I'll start with the man because Nabal's main name means fool. She was literally married to a fool that almost got everybody killed because he offended King David, and all 400 of his men came with the swords and a rash vow to kill every man that morning. Remember, we talked about that. And then you also have Job, right? What happened? The devil took away everything but one thing from Job.
His wife.
His wife. Why?
Because he used her.
Because he was on her side. Or she was on his side, right? She was the contentious wife, so she was left there. So what's the lesson? What's the application? What does the Bible say and call husbands to be? And what does the Bible say and call wives to be? And how do those two work together?
Food gatherer. And lover.
So what was that?
Food gatherer? No, I'm just throwing stuff out there.
What does the scriptures tell a husband to be? To what?
Love their
Lead-
wife like
lead.
the church.
Love their wives
The church.
like Christ loved the church and be willing to die for her. Okay? That's number one. Even the pastor taught on this a couple of weeks ago, right?
What scripture is that?
That's
1
in,
Peter 2:17.
yeah,
1 Peter 2:17.
I'm bad on the scriptures
And then you find
as
it
far
in
as the
life
address.
I'll be off on that.
Sunday.
That's right around
But you can definitely Google it. And then in response, and this one's tough for the ladies, but what does it say that the ladies should do?
Submit to
Submit.
your husband.
Submit to their husband.
Okay? But we've talked about this before in class. What does that mean? Does that mean submit to your husband always?
If he's just living the right life and like leading by example, and he's a good man, making the right decisions in life to lead your family, then follow him.
Because the wife, just like us, they have to submit to who first?
God.
God, yep, Lord.
So when your husband is submitting to God, then it's going to be easy for you to submit to your husband.
3:7.
Okay? So how this works, if it works magically, if it works beautifully, is that husbands have needs. We need to be edified. We have fragile egos, right? We need to understand. We need a helpmate that's going to encourage us, that's going to speak positivity into us when we're beaten down out in the world.
Words of affirmation.
Yes, we're going to need all those things. And likewise, the woman needs unconditional love, right? Now, if this is working in perfect harmony, then the husband leads and loves the wife unconditionally. And love is just, like we've talked about before, it's not just words. You can say I love you all you want, but if you don't pay the light bill, if you're a wife and you have no money because you're, not providing, that type of thing, if your man is sleeping out on you, then he can say he's loving you all he wants, but if he's out roaming the streets, he ain't loving you, right? So nonetheless, you need to love them, give them that security, know that they're loved in actions and words, and then they're going to respond by submitting to your leadership. What happens is that can get broke both ways.
Yeah.
So the man could love the woman, and then the woman get complacent, take that for granted, and not submit, and then the man gets bitterness and the whole relationship starts to break down. Likewise, the woman could not submit because she's not being loved, and then the whole relationship breaks down. When the relationship is working right, it lifts up because it's a marriage covenant, and it's supposed to be a reflection on earth of what Jesus did with the church in that covenant, and it's supposed to lift up and be strengthened through hardship and all those things. But if it goes wrong, the wheels can come off the bus quickly, right? It can get into the same synergies that can drive it up, can drive it down fast. And it's hard to repair once the trust is broken, right? We've all been there, right? So Joseph is,
What's your son?
oh, I'm sorry.
Good catch.
Good catch. Joseph is the perfect example for those who've been here for a while. If you're dealing with reconciliation issues in a relationship, you need to read Joseph and pray about it. But Joseph, specifically the story with his brothers, right? That's 101 for reconciliation. Because as much as he loved his other 11 brothers, the trust had been broken. He had been attempted to be murdered. That's a little bit of a foul, right? A little bit out of bounds, right? So obviously when he saw them again years later, he didn't run up and embrace them, right? He had to test them first. He didn't want the relationship like it was. He wanted the relationship like it should be. And a lot of us, especially when relationships are broken, we're hurting. And there's a strong temptation to just make the pain go away. Just hug them and accept them. Because it's better than the pain I have right now. Right? Anybody been there, or is it just me?
Been there.
Okay?
I've been to work for several years.
When the right answer is, you got to make sure the heart has changed. Otherwise, that person may not be safe to be around. Right? So it doesn't mean that you totally block them, but you have to kind of test them. You have to wait. You don't want the relationship the way it was because it hit the tree, right? You want the relationship the way it's supposed to be. And you can't have that if the partner isn't where they're supposed to be. And that takes time to see if the mouth is matching the hands. Thoughts? Anybody live through that? Any thoughts,
It's
questions?
easier for a relationship. It's very common for after someone makes a mistake in a relationship to be living in the past, than, most of the time than in the present, and trying to make the best of every moment from that point on because we're stuck in the past and it's being brought up throughout days and just takes a toll on the relationship. So coming to the church and learning what we're learning today, I think will make a big difference in a relationship if they're going through trials and tribulations like that.
Who brings up your past?
I'm saying your partner.
The accuser.
Yeah.
There you go, Salvador. So it's spiritual. When you start talking about the past, it's spiritual, right? So if you're feeling condemnation, If you're feeling anything from sin, assuming you're born again, you've accepted Jesus, you have a new life going forward. You need to be looking in the windshield, not the rearview mirror. Now, you can't be Pollyanna about this. So if someone has broken trust before and they're not trustworthy, it's foolish for you to just jump in.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to test, like Joseph did, that relationship and see if there's true change there. So you've got to hold them at bay. It doesn't mean don't love them. It doesn't mean don't forgive them. But forgiveness and reconciliation are two different things. Non-forgiveness is poison and it's bitter in our hearts. So it's important to forgive even if the person was totally evil to you, because you're not endorsing that person, you're trying to heal yourself. So you forgiving them and praying about it is important, because without that you're going to carry that burden. It's like carrying a backpack full of rocks everywhere you go, and your heart is focused on hate and it's focused on the rearview mirror instead of going forward.
I think we have to remember too, though, marriages come with seasons, the same as we come with seasons of being like Christians. Like, so everything seems to be going good, and then you have that thing that comes up, and you have to remember to have God in the middle of your relationship at all times, because when you get that season or that hard time, like if you don't communicate and let each other know that, like, hey, this is not how we're supposed to be with each other, like God wouldn't want us to do that, you're not doing your part, I'm not doing mine, and we don't keep God in the middle of that and reminding each other, then you kind of get to that point of where you don't communicate and you run. You either just, you're like, oh, you're not a Christian, like, or you're not a good spouse, and I don't want to deal with this, I have to just get away from it. And no marriage is perfect, and I remind people that every day, like, our marriage is not perfect, like, no relationship's always going to be perfect. You have seasons, and you have to be willing to fight through it, but if you're going to fight through it, you have to have God centered in the middle of all of it. Because if not, it's not going to work. It's never going to work.
No, I agree with you 100%. I've been married for 28 years, and almost everyone I know that was married at the same time we were married are all divorced.
Yep.
And hardships are going to come.
Yep.
But the idea is, how do you deal with them?
Exactly.
It's not whether the hardships are going to come, but when you take those vows and you say for better or for worse, that means if worse, you've got to, the analogy Heather and I say is like, if you've seen that very spiritual 007 movie, you know, where they're back to back with the guns. That's like Heather and I, right? So we've been in that position many times where it's just us and the whole world, it feels like, is against us. But you've got to be able to be thick and thin and keep God in the center, because you got to be able to, you know.
And if you seek counsel, you always need to remember to like seek it within somebody that has the same religious views as you. So like, say we're going through something and we're trying to talk to another couple or someone, it doesn't need to be somebody that doesn't view God in the center of their relationship. It should be somebody more seasoned that also believes the same way that we do, that can say, you know, point out each one of their, you know, their things they need to work on with each other. And the more that you have Christ in the middle of your relationship, the faster and easier it is to get through the next thing. The same as the outside worldly issues we come across, you know, when you seek God in the middle of it, it seems to be a lot easier to get through those things. It's the same thing within a marriage. If you put God first and you just keep reading the word and finding those words of wisdom, it just seems to go a lot easier.
And I would say the same verse we said about diligence and not being hasty applies to marriage.
Definitely.
Right? Because a lot of us, if we're honest, you know, the dating part, that's the easy part.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
The real work starts when you get married. And too many couples, what I see is they're having conflict and all these issues during dating, and they think, oh, well, when I get married, all this will go away, it'll be better. No. Those are called red flags, right?
With the forgiveness and reconciliation, I think I paralleled them a lot. historically, and then learning those differences, and then also learning that I can't hold someone who's not a Christian to my standard, cause they're not
Right.
gonna react that way.
Yeah, we've had that talk.
Yeah.
Baby Christians poop on the couch.
Yeah.
So you gotta be prepared when you're around them.
Mhm.
Keep some diapers and have a lot of grace,
Mhm.
right? Cause that's what they're gonna do. They're babies. They're gonna throw up, they're gonna poop. It's
Or if
gonna-
they're not believers at all, I can't expect them
Yes.
to act like one.
That's true too,
Mhm.
absolutely. And we're called to be a hospital for sinners, so we should have some grace. Okay. Who'd like to pray us out?
I will.
Okay.
Father, thank you for this time to gather together and learn from your word and encourage one another and lift each other up. Please help these truths and lessons to be instilled in us for righteous living, to prioritize justice and peace in our homes. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Can we stop the video? If you have a-